Field is a Swedish electronic music producer who makes a very specific style of electronic music that's not going to rub everyone the right way. His take on the genre revolves around these very hypnotic, repetitive, and a lot of the time mesmerizing and infectious loops. These electronic loops that just kind of progress throughout the song. He adds layers, strips down layers. You know, subtly just alters the track as it goes along. His tracks tend to go on for quite a while. He's got a pretty hefty back catalogue at this point. I believe this is his 6th album. Could be mistaken though. But yeah, essentially what I wanted from this thing was just more of what he's kind of been doing up to this point, but just done really well, because I feel like he's taken this style, this very hypnotic, repetitive, infectious style, and he's gone in a lot of different directions with this style in his career up to this point. I'm not sure if he can really go in any other directions. I feel like he's explored this style of music to its full potential, really. I don't really know how many more directions he can go in, so I'm just kind of hoping for him to just do what he has done up to this point, but just done really well. And with the follower, that's exactly what you get here. Some really solid production that's hypnotic, repetitive, and it just gets stuck in your head. You just get lost in the music really, really heavily. The opening track is one of my favorite songs this year. This whole track kicks off with a really hypnotic, bouncy synth melody. It kind of swerves in and out of distortion really nicely, and there's a very infectious and just grimy, bassy synth melody playing in the background as well. Later on in the track, a vocal sample kind of joins the mix, and the drums actually, as the track progresses, get really resonant and punchy. I think this is one of the most well-mixed tracks on the whole album. The progressions that are made here definitely feel like they have an impact on the song. Around the 4-minute mark, there's like a little intermission, I guess, but then the track comes back completely differently. There's like a whole second phase to this song. It comes back with a heavier drum beat, a brand new synth melody, some hi-hats join the track as well. And then in the final minutes of the song, there's this really high-pitched screeching synth that kind of plays every now and then, and it gives it a very eerie quality. This track goes in a lot of very interesting directions. I love the song Monte, Verita as well. The loop that this track starts off with is really haunting, really eerie. It consists of pretty much nearly entirely these female vocal samples that sound very heavenly, but also really kind of chilling. These samples, they're really like warped and manipulated. They get manipulated quite a lot, very frequently, throughout the track. They get pitched up and down, become more muffled and distorted, etc., stuff like that. And the bass line playing in the background works excellently with these samples, complements the track really nicely. Much like the first track, this song also has like an entirely different second phase, and the second phase of this track might be my favorite moment on the whole album. It's the closest thing to an EDM club banger I think we've ever heard from the Field. The bass line here is thunderous, and the hi-hats are really distinguishable, really resonant, and the kick drums as well are just super punchy. As the second half of this track kind of progresses, it kind of gets more and more explosive. The song Soft Streams, this track I think evolves the most of any song here. It makes more progressions as it goes along than any other track. It strips layers away, adds new ones all the time. It's constantly evolving. Bass lines and drum patterns and synth melodies are just kind of altering, going back and forth, going away, replacing with new ones. It just consistently evolves, and it's primarily made up of an incredibly odd vocal sample. It's super muffled, very dreary, gives the track a really haunting vibe. On the second half of this track, there are these synth arrangements and melodies that pop up. These sounds, they're very kind of twangy and odd, but then in the song's final minutes, we get some more odd synths. They sound like the kind of thing you would hear on Jamie XX's album In Color. The final track, Reflecting Lights, is the longest track here. It's 14 minutes. This track also has 2 phases to it. The first of which has no real like tangible, catchy melody to it. It just kind of consists of the super menacing drum loop. And some very reverby, distorted synths and drones as well. I also noticed as the first phase of this track progresses, the bass just gets more resonant and heavier. That is, of course, until the second phase of this track begins. The second phase kind of focuses around these kind of odd, disorienting piano chords and these really dizzying, bouncy synth drums. At first, I wasn't too huge on it. The piano, the repetitive nature of these piano chords just rubbed me the wrong way at the first couple of minutes. It still kind of does. I find it a bit irritating. But once it kind of gets going and more piano starts getting added, more layers start working alongside each other, I begin to appreciate it a little bit more. And overall, I think this track actually closes out the album pretty nicely. It's just the second half, like the first couple of minutes, it just kind of rubs me the wrong way. But then I just kind of get used to it, adjust to it, and, you know, I'm okay with it then. The only two weak moments on the album would be the song Pink Sun and Raise the Dead. Well, Pink Sun I actually think is a really good track. It's just, it only has one phase. It doesn't really have an entirely different, phase to it like the other tracks do. It has a very gentle guitar sample in the primary loop of the track. Definitely one of the more layered songs on the album for sure. I like how it kind of abruptly goes back and forth between this like gentle loop to this very quick and intense sporadic synth phrase with these like whispery vocal samples. Kind of alternates back and forth between these two loops. I just wish this track had entered another phase because it's like 8 minutes long, 7 minutes long, something like that. And I feel like you could have probably cut off like 2 or 3 minutes. Like, I think the loop just gets a bit, tiresome by the end, the final minutes of the track. And then we have the song Raise the Dead, which is, in my opinion, easily the weakest song here. The main loop of this track, the potential in this loop is exhausted really quickly. It gets tiresome way too fast. And it's one of the longer tracks. It was like 11 minutes. And the progressions that this track makes are, in my opinion, way too subtle. And as a result, they just feel ultimately meaningless. The changes, the alterations and subtle progressions this track goes through don't really impact the track in any significant way. And it just feels like an overly long, drab, boring, dud in the track listing. So this thing is pretty lengthy. It's over an hour long. It's only 6 tracks as well, these really lengthy tracks. And the only one track I just don't care for, I just think is a bad song, is that one. The rest, I think, are all at the very least good tracks. So overall, I think it's a very solid release from the Field. I think it's really good. I think Field fans are going to be completely satisfied with this. It's essentially the same kind of thing Field has been doing up to this point in his career, but just doing it really well. Overall, I think it's a really good album. I think it's in no way whatsoever a weak point in the Field's discography. I enjoyed it quite a lot. So yeah, if you're a fan of like very patient, slow, repetitive, hypnotic electronic music, definitely try this out. I think you're probably going to enjoy it quite a bit. So that's my review of The Follower by The Field. Goodbye.